She was feeding someone in secret every day, until her billionaire boss discovered the truth. What would you do if you discovered that your housekeeper skips lunch every single day to feed someone else? Thomas Everett, a lonely billionaire from Boston, witnessed something from his window that would forever be etched in his memory. His domestic employee kneeling by the back gate of his estate, handing over her only meal of the day to an unknown child. What he didn't know was that this simple gesture concealed a love so pure it would end up transforming his life forever. Stay until the end and discover how a single plate of food changed 3 destinies. Margaret Sullivan walked through the marble hallways of the mansion with silent steps, as if she wanted to disappear among the shadows. At 37 years old, she had been working for Thomas Everett for 6 years, a real estate mogul from Massachusetts, whose fortune was as vast as his loneliness. The house had 24 rooms, but only he lived there, surrounded by expensive paintings and furniture that no one ever used. Margaret cleaned every corner with dedication, even though she knew many spaces hadn't received visitors in months. Her light grey uniform was always impeccable, ironed by herself every night after returning to her small rented house in a humble neighborhood in Dorchester. She wore her brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, never loose, because that's what the regulations demanded. Her hands showed the marks of hard work, but her hazel eyes held a special light every time the clock struck 12:30 in the afternoon. It was the sacred hour, the moment she had been waiting for since waking before dawn. That Wednesday in October, like every day, Margaret went down to the main kitchen when the clock hands indicated 12 o'clock. The head cook, Mrs. Patterson, had already served lunch for Mr. Everett in the formal dining room, although he almost never touched the food. Margaret was entitled to 1 plate a day, part of her employment contract signed years ago. That afternoon it was beef stew with mashed potatoes, green beans, and freshly baked bread. Everything served on a white ceramic plate. The aroma of the stew with herbs filled the small service kitchen, making her stomach growl with hunger. She had been working since 5 in the morning without rest, only with black coffee and 2 crackers she kept in her pocket. Mrs. Patterson watched her with curiosity every time Margaret asked for her food to be served in a plastic container with a lid, never on a normal plate. The cook never asked anything, but her narrowed eyes betrayed her suspicion. Margaret walked toward the back gate of the mansion with the container hidden inside a worn cloth bag. The Boston sun fell weakly over the perfectly manicured garden, where the ivy climbed the wrought iron railings. Her black flat shoes crunched against the white gravel of the path that surrounded the property. No one watched that area at that hour. The other employees ate in the staff dining room or rested in their quarters. The back gate was an old structure of dark wood with a small metal window that Margaret opened carefully to avoid making noise. On the other side, sitting on the cracked concrete sidewalk, waited Daniel, her 12-year-old son, with his worn school backpack leaning against his thin legs. The boy wore his public school uniform, faded blue pants, and a white t-shirt that already showed yellowish stains from being washed so many times. His sneakers had holes in the toes, but his smile was the most beautiful Margaret had ever seen in her life. "Mom," whispered Daniel, stretching his small hands toward the container his mother passed through the window. His hazel eyes shone with a mixture of hunger and gratitude. Margaret knelt on the other side of the gate to be at his height, even though the wood separated them. She could see her son's thin face, his sunken cheeks from the malnutrition she tried to combat day after day. Daniel opened the container, and the steam from the hot stew escaped into the dry air. The boy ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a feast worthy of kings. Margaret watched him in silence, with her hands pressed against her empty stomach that cried out for food. Every time Daniel smiled between bites, she felt that everything was worth it. Working 15 hours a day, enduring the back pain, ignoring the constant hunger. Everything was justified in that sacred moment where she could see her boy eat something warm and nutritious. "Did you already eat, Mom?" asked Daniel with his mouth full, looking at her with those innocent eyes that still didn't understand how much she sacrificed for him. Margaret smiled and nodded her head. A white lie she repeated every day for the past 4 years since she started working in that mansion. The truth was that she wouldn't taste a bite until she got home around 8 at night, where she would eat only tortillas with salt and cheese. Her body had learned to function on 1 meal a day, although the fatigue sometimes made her stumble while mopping the mansion floors. Daniel finished eating and returned the empty container, clean as if he had licked it with his tongue. The farewell was always quick, a virtual kiss blown through the metal window, before the boy ran toward his afternoon school 6 blocks away. Margaret closed the gate carefully and hugged the empty container against her chest for a moment. No one in that mansion knew that every day she chose hunger so her son could smile. Thomas Everett was climbing the marble stairs toward his master bedroom when something caught his attention through the hallway window. From the second floor, there was a privileged view of the back garden and the old service gate that no one used anymore. It was 12:40 in the afternoon that Wednesday, and he had just left a video conference that had left him with a headache. At 43 years old, he directed one of the most successful business groups in Massachusetts, with investments in real estate, technology, and finance. His black hair combed back showed some gray at the temples that gave him a distinguished air. He wore dark gray dress pants and a white shirt with rolled-up cuffs, his usual uniform for working from home. The thin-framed glasses he used for reading rested on the bridge of his nose when he stopped in front of the window. What he saw made him completely forget his financial problems. Margaret was kneeling in front of the back gate with her hands extended toward the metal window. Thomas squinted, trying to understand what his employee was doing in that position, almost as if she were praying. Then he saw a child's small hands receive something through the window, a plastic container that seemed to contain food. The entire scene lasted barely 5 minutes, but something about it captured the billionaire's attention in a way he couldn't explain. He watched as Margaret looked at the child with a tenderness he had never seen in anyone. How she smiled even though her own cheeks looked more sunken each week. The boy ate with contained desperation, like someone who knows that might be their only decent meal of the day. Thomas felt a strange pang in his chest, something similar to discomfort but mixed with curiosity. Who was that child, and why was Margaret secretly giving him food? Over the next 3 days, Thomas found himself waiting at 12:30 in the afternoon to discreetly position himself at that hallway window. On Thursday, he observed the same scene. Margaret walking with her cloth bag toward the gate, the child waiting on the other side, the silent delivery of the container. On Friday, he noticed that Margaret wore shoes with worn soles and that her uniform, although clean, showed signs of too many washes. On Saturday, when most of the staff had off, Margaret was still there working overtime hours that no one paid her for, and still she found time to bring food to the child who faithfully waited on the sidewalk. Thomas began to feel something he hadn't experienced in many years: genuine admiration for another human being. In his world of million-dollar contracts and ruthless negotiations, he had forgotten that there were people capable of giving without expecting anything in return. That humble woman was teaching him a lesson that none of his Harvard professors had been able to give him. The following Monday, Thomas canceled an important meeting and stayed watching longer than usual. He saw how Margaret knelt with difficulty, as if her knees hurt from constant work. He saw how the child ate slowly, savoring each bite while conversing with his mother through the window. He couldn't hear the words, but the gestures told him a story of pure love and silent sacrifice. When Margaret got up to return to the mansion, Thomas noticed that she swayed slightly, probably dizzy from hunger and fatigue. He clenched his fists against the window frame, feeling an inexplicable rage against himself. He had lived 6 years in that house with Margaret working for him, and he had never taken the trouble to know her as a person. To him, she was just a name on the payroll, an efficient employee who kept his mansion impeccable. Now, seeing her sacrifice in silence, he understood that he had ignored the presence of someone truly extraordinary. On Tuesday morning, Thomas called Mrs. Patterson to his private office on the first floor. The cook entered, wiping her hands on her flowered apron, with a nervous expression, as always when the boss summoned her. He was sitting behind his dark mahogany desk, surrounded by framed diplomas and photographs of buildings he had constructed. He offered her a seat with a gesture, something unusual that made Mrs. Patterson even more tense. Thomas got straight to the point, asking her about Margaret and her eating habits. The cook hesitated a moment before confessing that Margaret always asked for her food in plastic containers and that she had never seen her eat in the staff dining room. Mrs. Patterson added in a low voice that she had noticed how the employee kept crackers in her pockets and how her uniform fit looser and looser. Thomas thanked her for the information and dismissed the cook with a gesture. When he was alone in his office, he looked out the window toward the back garden, feeling that something inside him was changing. That afternoon, he decided he needed to discover the complete truth about Margaret and the child at the gate, although he still didn't know why it mattered so much to him. That revelation from Mrs. Patterson didn't let Thomas sleep all Tuesday night. Lying in his king-size bed with Egyptian linen sheets, he stared at the high ceiling of his room, thinking about Margaret and her plastic container. 3 in the morning showed on the antique clock on his nightstand when he finally accepted something uncomfortable. He had spent years living in a bubble of privilege while ignoring the suffering of those around him. His father had taught him that employees were just numbers on a balance sheet, interchangeable pieces in the machinery of a company. But Margaret was showing him that behind each uniform there was a person with their own stories, with sacrifices that no one saw. He got out of bed and walked barefoot to his bedroom window, from where he could see the dim lights of Boston extending to the horizon. Somewhere in that city, Margaret slept in a humble house after having worked 15 hours and eaten barely some crackers. The contrast made him feel ashamed of his own empty existence. Wednesday morning, Thomas arrived early at his office, determined to change his perspective on many things. He reviewed the human resources files and found Margaret Sullivan's record. 37 years old, widowed, address in Dorchester neighborhood, minimum wage, no absences or tardiness in 6 years of service. The file was so brief it fit on a single page, as if an entire life could be summarized in cold data. There was no attached photograph, no personal note, nothing that revealed who that woman really was. Thomas closed the folder, feeling a growing frustration against the system he himself had perpetuated for years. At 12:20 in the afternoon, he abandoned his desk and ran up the stairs to the hallway window. He arrived just in time to see Margaret walking toward the back gate with her cloth bag, her slow steps betraying accumulated fatigue. The sun made her brown hair shine, and for the first time Thomas noticed that she was a beautiful woman, despite the dark circles and sunken cheeks. That afternoon's scene was identical to the previous ones, but Thomas observed it with different eyes. Margaret knelt in front of the gate with the same devotion as always, and the child received the container with pure gratitude. What impacted the billionaire was realizing that this gesture repeated every day without exception, without complaining, without asking for recognition. Margaret wasn't seeking applause or admiration, she simply loved through concrete actions. In Thomas's world, people did favors expecting something in return. They signed contracts to protect their interests, donated money to appear in newspapers. But that woman gave the only thing she had, her food, without witnesses or cameras. She delivered her daily plate knowing she would go hungry, and she did it with a smile that illuminated her tired face. Thomas felt something break inside his chest, as if a concrete wall he had built around his heart began to crumble stone by stone. When Margaret returned walking toward the mansion with the empty container, Thomas made an impulsive decision. He went down the stairs 2 at a time and went out to the back garden, pretending to check the ivy climbing the railings. Margaret saw him approaching and stopped dead, her eyes wide open and the container quickly hidden behind her back. The house protocol established that employees should keep their distance from the boss unless called directly. She bowed her head in a sign of respect, waiting for some reprimand for being in an area that didn't correspond to her. Thomas approached slowly, taking off his glasses to clean them with the edge of his white shirt, a nervous gesture he made when he didn't know how to start a difficult conversation. The silence between them stretched for several seconds while the wind moved the leaves of nearby trees. Finally, he spoke with a softer voice than he intended, asking her if everything was okay with her work. Margaret nodded quickly, too quickly, her hands trembling slightly while holding the container behind her grey uniform. "Mr. Everett, forgive me if I did something wrong," murmured Margaret with a broken voice, her hazel eyes full of genuine concern. Thomas shook his head, surprised that she thought she was in trouble. He assured her that her work was impeccable, that the house had never been better cared for. He noticed how Margaret's shoulders relaxed just a little, although her posture remained tense. He wanted to ask her about the child at the gate, about why she didn't eat her lunch, about the whole story he sensed behind that daily sacrifice. But the words stuck in his throat because he didn't know how to express his curiosity without sounding invasive or condescending. Margaret took advantage of the uncomfortable silence to apologize again and walk quickly toward the service entrance, disappearing among the shadows of the interior hallway. Thomas remained alone in the garden with the sun burning his neck and a strange sensation fluttering in his stomach. For the first time in his adult life, he deeply admired someone who didn't have money, a university degree, or a recognized surname. Thursday afternoon, Thomas cancelled all his meetings and told his driver he wouldn't need his services that day. At 12:15 in the afternoon, he discreetly went down the service stairs that employees used, a narrow hallway that smelled of pine detergent and floor wax. He had never walked through that area of his own house and was surprised how different everything looked from that perspective. The walls were painted a light grey without ornaments. The floors were polished cement instead of marble, and the windows were small and without elegant curtains. It was like discovering that his mansion had 2 faces, one beautiful for guests and another functional for those who really made everything work. He reached the back door that led to the service garden, a reduced space with clotheslines and stacked plastic buckets. From there he could see the old gate without being seen, hidden behind a concrete column covered with vines. His heart beat fast, as if he were committing a prank instead of being on his own property. Margaret appeared exactly at 12:30, punctual as always, walking along the gravel path with her cloth bag hanging from her shoulder. Thomas held his breath while watching her approach the gate. She opened the metal window with movements practiced through repetition, and on the other side appeared the child's face illuminated by an enormous smile. The billionaire moved a little closer, taking advantage that both were concentrated on their daily ritual. He managed to position himself behind a jasmine bush from where he could hear their voices, although the wind carried away some words. Margaret passed the container through the window while asking the boy how school had gone. The little one responded with enthusiasm, telling her something about a science class and a project he had made. The child's voice was high-pitched but firm, full of that innocence that only those who still believe the world is good have. "Do you have your jacket, honey? You know it gets cold in the afternoons," said Margaret in a maternal tone, stretching a hand through the window to touch the boy's cheek. Thomas saw how her fingers caressed the little one's face with infinite tenderness. The boy nodded while opening the container, and the aroma of beef stew escaped into the air. He began to eat with large spoonfuls, and Margaret watched him with those eyes full of unconditional love that Thomas had only seen in movies. Then happened what would change everything. The boy spoke with his mouth half full, saying words that arrived clearly to the billionaire's hidden ears. The words were simple every day, but loaded with a meaning that hit him like a punch in the stomach. The boy called Margaret Mom not once, but 3 times in the same conversation. "Mom, it's delicious. Mom, I had a test today. Mom, I love you." Thomas felt his legs weaken. The complete reality revealed itself before his eyes, as if someone had turned on all the lights in a dark room. Margaret wasn't feeding an unknown child out of charity. She was sacrificing her own food so her son could eat. That was her boy, her blood, her reason for getting up every dawn. Thomas leaned against the concrete wall, feeling the world spin around him. He remembered all the times he had seen her walk with slow steps from fatigue, how her uniform fit looser and looser, how her cheeks sank week after week. She was literally consuming herself to keep her son alive. There was no drama or complaints, just a silent and absolute love expressed in concrete actions day after day. The billionaire clenched his fist, trying to control the emotions that threatened to overflow. For 6 years, Margaret had worked in his house, earning barely the minimum, and still she found a way to be generous with the only thing she had. "Mom, did you already eat?" asked Daniel, the same words he repeated every afternoon, as Thomas could hear. Margaret's response was the white lie as always, assuring him that yes, she had eaten very well. The boy smiled relieved and continued devouring the stew with bread while telling his mother about his best friend Chris and a basketball game they would play on Saturday. Margaret listened to every word as if it were pure gold, nodding and asking questions that demonstrated her genuine interest in her son's life. When Daniel finished eating, he cleaned the container with the last piece of bread and returned it through the window. Both said goodbye with kisses blown into the air and promises to see each other at night. Margaret closed the window carefully and hugged the empty container against her chest for a moment, with her eyes closed and an expression of peace on her face. Thomas had to bite his lower lip to avoid making noise because something wet ran down his cheeks. He didn't remember when was the last time he had cried, but at that moment tears flowed without permission while he observed the purest love he had witnessed in his life. Thomas returned to his room like a ghost, climbing the main stairs without really seeing the steps under his feet. He closed the solid mahogany door with a lock and let himself fall sitting on the edge of his bed, still processing what he had just witnessed. Tears continued flowing without control, wetting the expensive fabric of his Italian white shirt. At 43 years old, he had built a business empire, getting up at 5 in the morning every day, sacrificing personal relationships, rejecting social invitations, everything focused on accumulating more money and more power. But Margaret, with the salary he earned in an hour of work, had discovered something he completely lacked: the ability to love without conditions. He looked around his enormous room, decorated by an interior designer who charged a fortune to choose each piece of furniture. The olive green velvet curtains, the antique French desk, the crystal lamp that cost more than Margaret's annual salary. Everything was beautiful and empty like his entire life. He got up and walked to the white marble bathroom, opening the cold water faucet to wash his face. His reflection in the mirror showed him a successful man according to the world's standards. Strong jaw, penetrating green eyes, well-cut black hair, fit body thanks to his private gym. But behind that perfect facade, there was an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. His father had died 12 years ago without ever telling him he loved him, only leaving him a company and the expectation of being ruthless in business. His mother lived in Paris with her fourth husband, calling him twice a year to ask for bank transfers. He had never had a real loving relationship because he always put his work first, and the women who approached only saw his bank account. Loneliness had accompanied him so long that he no longer recognized it as abnormal. Until that day when he saw true love expressing itself in a plate of stew shared through a rusty window. That night, Thomas couldn't concentrate on reviewing the contracts waiting for his signature on his office desk. The words mixed before his eyes while his mind replayed over and over the scene at the gate. Margaret kneeling, Daniel smiling, the container passing from hungry hands to grateful hands. He closed the document folder with a sharp blow and walked to the window overlooking the front garden. The city lights blinked in the distance like fallen stars. Somewhere in Boston, Margaret was arriving at her house after working 15 hours and would probably have dinner with only crackers and cheese. Daniel would be doing homework under the yellowish light of a weak bulb without knowing that his mother sacrificed so much for him. The contrast between his reality and theirs was so brutal that Thomas felt shame for every dollar he had in the bank. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass of the window and let tears flow again, this time without trying to stop them. For the first time in decades, Thomas allowed himself to remember his own childhood. He had grown up in a mansion similar to this one, surrounded by employees who took care of him because they were paid, not because they loved him. His father was always traveling, closing deals in other cities or countries. His mother organized elegant parties but never asked him how he felt or what he dreamed. Birthdays were formal events with children from other wealthy families who only attended out of social obligation. He never had someone who knelt to be at his height, who looked at him with eyes full of unconditional tenderness, who sacrificed something of their own just to see him happy. Daniel was 12 years old and already possessed the most valuable treasure in the world, a mother who loved him more than her own life. That boy with torn sneakers and worn uniform was infinitely richer than little Thomas with his imported toys and his room full of things no one used. The irony hit him with brutal force. Thomas spent that entire night awake, sitting in the leather armchair of his office while the clock slowly advanced toward dawn. He made important decisions in those hours of darkness, promises he made to himself under the invisible stars of the Boston sky. He needed to give back to Margaret's kind heart, not with money she could reject out of pride, but with something more meaningful. He wanted that woman to stop going hungry, for her son to have shoes without holes, for both to know a life where they didn't have to choose between eating or paying rent. But more than that, he wanted to learn from her, understand how someone with so little could give so much. At 6 in the morning on Friday, while the first rays of sun painted the sky orange and pink, Thomas knew exactly what he would do. The plan that was beginning to form in his mind was risky and broke all social protocols, but something inside him had changed forever, and he could no longer be the same cold man from yesterday. If you're enjoying this story and it's touching your heart, consider joining our community by subscribing to the channel. We share stories like this one that remind us what truly matters in life, and we'd love to have you as part of our family here. Saturday dawned with clear skies and pleasant temperature, typical of autumn in Boston. Thomas woke up early despite having slept barely 3 hours, with nerves fluttering in his stomach like restless butterflies. He showered with hot water while mentally reviewing what he would say when the moment came. He chose casual clothes from his closet, something unusual for him. Dark blue jeans, sand-colored linen shirt rolled up to the elbows, brown leather casual shoes. He wanted to look accessible, not intimidating. In front of the bathroom mirror, he practiced smiles that didn't look forced, relaxed gestures that hid his anxiety. At 9 in the morning, he took the keys to his personal truck, a black Ford he rarely drove himself. He told the security staff he would go out alone and didn't need an escort, something that left them confused but they didn't dare question. As he drove through the city streets, he felt a strange freedom he hadn't experienced in years. The Dorchester neighborhood was on the other side of Boston, in an area where houses were small and streets narrow. Thomas had to check the GPS 3 times because he had never visited that part of the city despite having lived his entire life in Massachusetts. The constructions were simple, with facades of colors faded by the sun and windows protected by rusty iron bars. Children played basketball in the street using makeshift hoops, and ladies swept the sidewalks in front of their homes. People looked at him with curiosity when he passed in his truck that clearly didn't belong to that neighborhood. Finally, he found the address he had searched in the human resources files. A small one-story house with sky blue paint peeling off. There was a gray sheet metal gate and a window with white mended curtains. He parked the truck in front of the house, breathed deeply several times, and got out of the vehicle feeling he was about to cross a bridge from which there would be no return. He knocked on the sheet metal gate with his knuckles, producing a metallic sound that resonated on the quiet street. He heard movement inside the house, quick steps approaching. Margaret's voice asked who it was from the other side with a cautious tone. Thomas cleared his throat and responded with his name, feeling ridiculous formally introducing himself in that context. The silence that followed lasted several eternal seconds. Finally, the gate opened slowly, squeaking from lack of oil on the hinges. Margaret appeared in the doorway with enormous eyes of surprise and fear, dressed in worn jeans and a simple pink blouse. Her brown hair fell loose over her shoulders, and without the grey uniform she looked younger, more vulnerable. Behind her in the small cement patio, Daniel played with a deflated plastic ball. The boy also froze when he saw the stranger standing at his house. Margaret's expression was a mixture of confusion, shame, and panic. "Mr. Everett, did something happen? Did I do something wrong at work?" were the first words that sprang from Margaret's lips, her voice trembling slightly. Thomas shook his head quickly, raising his hands in a reassuring gesture. He assured her there was no problem, that her work was perfect as always. Margaret didn't seem convinced. Her hands twisted nervously against the fabric of her blouse. The house behind her was so small that Thomas could see almost the entire interior from where he was standing. A tiny living room with a mended sofa, a plastic table with 2 mismatched chairs, a kitchenette visible in the back with barely 2 burners. The walls were painted white but showed moisture stains in the corners. Daniel approached his mother slowly, taking her hand with a protective gesture. The billionaire saw in the boy's eyes the same determination he had observed through the gate window, that mixture of innocence and maturity forced by circumstances. "I came to invite you and Daniel to have lunch with me," said Thomas with a firmer voice than he felt inside. The words came out direct, without beating around the bush, because he had learned in business that clarity avoided misunderstandings. Margaret blinked several times as if she hadn't understood English correctly. Her mouth opened and closed without emitting sound. Thomas continued speaking, explaining that he wanted to thank her for her years of impeccable service, that he considered it important to better know the people who made his daily comfort possible. The excuses sounded weak even to his own ears, but he couldn't tell the complete truth, that he had been watching them in secret, that he had discovered her sacrifice, that her tears had changed him. Margaret began to reject the invitation with nervous stammering, arguing that she didn't have appropriate clothes, that she didn't want to cause trouble, that Saturday was her day off. But then Thomas smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated his usually serious face, and said the words that would change everything. "Please, Margaret, it would be an honor for me to share a meal with you and your son." Margaret took 20 minutes to change clothes and prepare Daniel, time during which Thomas waited patiently, sitting on the only sofa in the living room that creaked under his weight. He observed every detail of that humble house. Framed photographs with cheap frames showing Daniel at different stages of growth, a wooden crucifix hanging on the main wall, handmade curtains with flowered fabric, polished cement floors shining from obsessive cleanliness. There was no television, only an old radio on a shelf. Daniel's school books were neatly stacked in a corner next to notebooks covered with newspaper. Everything was poor but dignified, clean to the last corner, organized with that care that only those who deeply value the little they possess have. When Margaret came out of the only visible bedroom, she wore a simple wine-colored dress with long sleeves, probably her best garment saved for special occasions. She had let down her hair and applied a little lip gloss, looking beautiful in a natural way that none of the women at Thomas's social events achieved with their surgeries and professional makeup. Daniel appeared behind his mother wearing blue jeans less worn than the daily ones and a light blue checkered shirt that was a little big on him. The boy had combed his black hair to one side with water, leaving visible marks from the comb. His shoes were the same ones with holes in the toes, but Margaret had cleaned them until they shone as if they were new. Thomas felt a lump in his throat seeing the effort both had made to look presentable. During the trip in the truck to the restaurant, a family place called Seaside Grill that served fresh seafood, Margaret and Daniel remained silent looking out the windows. The billionaire tried to start a conversation asking Daniel about school, and the boy responded with shy monosyllables while his mother watched him out of the corner of her eye. The tension in the atmosphere was palpable, as if everyone were acting in a play without knowing their lines. When they arrived at the restaurant located in a middle-class residential area, Margaret hesitated before getting out of the vehicle. The Seaside Grill restaurant had nautical decoration with fishing nets hanging from the ceiling and photographs of boats on the walls. The waiter led them to a table by the window overlooking a small interior garden with a stone fountain. Daniel was fascinated watching the water spout from the mouth of a stone dolphin, his eyes shining with childlike wonder. Margaret sat in the chair with her back very straight, her hands on her lap, clearly uncomfortable in that environment. Thomas ordered a pitcher of lemonade and asked the waiter to bring the complete menu. When Margaret saw the prices on the laminated menu, her eyes opened wide and she began to say she would only have a glass of water, that she wasn't hungry. The billionaire insisted gently, explaining that he would pay for everything and that it would be an insult to him if they didn't eat well. Daniel looked at his mother, waiting for permission, his little belly sounding audibly. Finally, Margaret gave in and ordered grilled salmon, while Daniel chose fish and chips after confirming 3 times that he could really order what he wanted. While they waited for the food, something magical happened that none of the 3 anticipated. Thomas asked Margaret how she had come to work in his house, and she began to tell her story with a soft voice that gradually gained confidence. She spoke of her husband Robert, a good and hard-working electrician who died in a construction accident 6 years ago when Daniel was 6 years old. She told how she was left alone with a small child, without close family to support her, with barely a high school education. She explained that she tried several cleaning jobs in offices and houses until getting the job at the Everett mansion, the best paid she had found. Her voice broke slightly when admitting it was never enough money, that each month was a battle between paying rent, electricity, water, and buying food. Daniel listened to his mother's story as if it were the first time, although he probably knew every word. His hazel eyes moistened when Margaret mentioned his deceased father. Thomas instinctively extended his hand across the table and took Margaret's trembling hand, an intimate gesture that surprised both of them. "I never had what you give to Daniel," confessed Thomas with a hoarse voice, his own eyes moistening behind his glasses. He began to speak of his lonely childhood, of physically or emotionally absent parents, of a mansion full of things but empty of love. He admitted he had built his business empire seeking to fill an emptiness that money never could satisfy. Margaret listened to him with genuine attention, without judging, just nodding with understanding. She told him something he would never forget, simple but profound words, pronounced with the wisdom of someone who has suffered and learned. She told him that God puts people in our past to teach us what really matters, that love is the only treasure worth accumulating. When the food arrived, the 3 were no longer boss and employee with her son, but 3 human beings sharing their wounds and hopes. Daniel devoured his fish and chips with pure happiness, occasionally interrupting to tell childish jokes that made Thomas laugh for the first time in months. That 2-hour lunch became the most real and meaningful moment the billionaire had experienced in his entire adult existence. Monday morning, Thomas arrived early at his office in the mansion with a completely formed plan in his mind. He called Mrs. Patterson and gave her specific instructions that left the cook with her mouth open. Starting that day, lunch should be prepared for 3 people, Mr. Everett, Margaret, and Daniel. The boy would arrive daily at 12:30 through the main gate, not the back one, and would have lunch in the family dining room together with his mother and the boss. Mrs. Patterson asked if she had heard correctly, and Thomas repeated the instructions firmly but without anger. Then he summoned Margaret to his office, where she entered trembling, thinking she would finally be fired for having accepted Saturday's invitation. The billionaire was standing in front of the window, looking toward the garden where the ivy bloomed with intense colors. He turned toward her with a soft expression that completely transformed his usually serious face. The words he pronounced changed Margaret's life in an instant. "Margaret, I want Daniel to have lunch here inside with us starting today," said Thomas, walking toward his desk to lean on the edge. Margaret shook her head immediately, her hands gesturing nervously while trying to reject the offer. She argued that she couldn't accept such generosity, that they already paid her salary and that was enough, that she didn't want to abuse the boss's kindness. Her cheeks blushed with shame while she spoke hurriedly. Thomas raised a hand asking for silence, and when Margaret fell quiet, he continued speaking with a firm but warm voice. He explained it wasn't charity but justice, that she worked more hours than anyone in that house, that she deserved to be able to see her son during the day. He added something that made tears instantly spring from Margaret's eyes. He said he wanted her to prepare her best food every day because he would also have lunch with them. He would no longer eat alone in the formal dining room looking at empty walls, but would share the table with people who valued each bite. Furthermore, continued Thomas, taking off his glasses to clean them nervously, I have decided to triple your salary starting this month. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came out. Her legs trembled and she had to hold on to the back of a leather chair in front of the desk. The billionaire kept talking, explaining that he had reviewed all the staff salaries and that hers was unfairly low considering her seniority and dedication. He didn't mention that he had seen her daily sacrifice, that he knew about the shared food container, that her tears had transformed him. Margaret covered her face with both hands and began to sob without control, her body shaken by emotions too large to contain. Thomas approached and put a gentle hand on her shoulder, a paternal gesture he had never made with any employee. He gave her time to process the information while he waited patiently. When Margaret could finally speak, she only managed to whisper a broken thank you that came directly from her soul. That same afternoon, at 12:30 sharp, Daniel arrived at the main gate of the mansion, as his mother had indicated by phone. The security guard, previously instructed by Thomas, received him kindly and led him along the main gravel path toward the formal entrance. The boy walked with enormous eyes, admiring the ornamental fountains, the perfectly designed gardens, the imported marble sculptures. He had never seen so much beauty and luxury concentrated in one place. Margaret waited for him at the entrance and hugged him tightly before taking him by the hand toward the family dining room, a smaller and more intimate room than the main dining room. The dark wood table was set for 3 places: fine porcelain plates, silver cutlery, crystal glasses. Daniel sat in the chair with extreme care, as if he feared breaking something. Thomas arrived minutes later, having changed his formal shirt for a more casual one, and sat in front of the boy with a genuine smile. Mrs. Patterson served roast chicken with mashed potatoes and fresh vegetables, Daniel's favorite dish, according to the billionaire's research. The conversation during that first lunch was initially uncomfortable, with long silences interrupted by polite questions. But gradually, as Daniel began to relax at Thomas's genuine interest, words flowed more naturally. The boy talked about his dream of being a professional basketball player, how he played on an empty lot with his friends using a makeshift hoop. He explained that his favorite position was point guard because he liked to assist his teammates. Thomas listened to every word with complete attention, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated true interest. Margaret observed the interaction with silent tears rolling down her cheeks, seeing how her son conversed with that powerful man as if they were old friends. When they finished eating, Thomas asked if Daniel had to return immediately to school. The boy shook his head, explaining that his afternoon classes started at 3. Then the billionaire invited him to see the back garden, where there was a wide space perfect for practicing basketball. For the first time in 6 years, the Everett mansion resonated with childish laughter that filled the empty spaces with a joy that money could never buy. The following months transformed the Everett mansion into something completely different. Daniel arrived every afternoon with his worn backpack and his bright smile, filling the marble hallways with childish energy that beautifully contrasted with the previous silence. Thomas reorganized his entire work schedule to be available during lunch, rejecting meetings he previously considered priority. The 3 sat in the family dining room, sharing not only food but stories, laughter, dreams, and concerns. Margaret began to gain healthy weight. Her cheeks recovered color, and her gray uniform had to be adjusted because it was too big. The billionaire noticed every small change in her, how her smile appeared more frequently, how her hazel eyes shone when Daniel told something funny, how her hands no longer trembled nervously when serving food. Mrs. Patterson commented in the kitchen that she had never seen the boss so relaxed, so human, so alive. The entire house breathed differently, as if the walls had absorbed the warmth of those daily lunches. One December afternoon, while Daniel did homework in the mansion library under Margaret's supervision, Thomas observed the boy concentrating on his notebooks covered with newspaper. The little one bit the tip of his pencil trying to solve math problems, his thin legs swinging under the enormous chair. The billionaire approached and asked about the dream of being a basketball player that Daniel had mentioned months ago. The boy's eyes lit up while describing with passion his desire to play professionally, to score baskets in full stadiums, to make his mom feel proud. He spoke with that pure conviction that only children have before the world teaches them to doubt their dreams. Thomas listened attentively, and when Daniel finished speaking, the billionaire made a decision he had been considering for weeks. He explained that he knew an excellent sports academy in Cambridge, a place where they train talented children to develop their basketball skills. He asked if Daniel would like to attend there with all expenses covered, professional equipment included. Daniel looked at his mother with pleading eyes, not daring to respond directly. Margaret felt her heart split between immense gratitude and the fear of accepting too much. She had learned since childhood that good things always had a hidden price, That extreme generosity hid impossible expectations to fulfill. But when she looked into Thomas's green eyes, she didn't see conditions or manipulation. She only saw a genuine desire to help her son achieve his dreams. With a trembling voice, she asked why he was doing all that for them, what he expected to receive in return. The billionaire's response was simple but devastatingly honest. He said they had given him something all his money could never buy. They had taught him the meaning of true love. They had shown him that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. He added that allowing him to be part of their lives was the greatest gift anyone had ever given him. Tears ran freely down Margaret's cheeks as she nodded, accepting her son's enrollment in that academy that would change his future. Training began in January, 3 times a week in the afternoons. Thomas not only paid the enrollment but also accompanied Daniel to each session, sitting in the metal bleachers under the Boston sun to watch how the boy ran after the ball with fierce determination. He bought new uniforms, professional sneakers, quality shin guards, everything necessary for Daniel to have the same opportunities as children from wealthy families. On Saturdays, when Margaret had off, the 3 went together to watch practice games. The billionaire shouted cheers when Daniel touched the ball, applauded every successful pass, consoled him when he missed a shot. The other parents in the bleachers looked at him with curiosity, that elegant man cheering with passion for the boy of humble origin. But Thomas didn't notice the looks because he was completely absorbed in Daniel's happiness. After training, they bought ice cream at a nearby shop, the 3 walking through Cambridge streets, sharing cones of vanilla and chocolate. Those simple moments became the billionaire's favorites. As months passed, something deeper began to bloom between Thomas and Margaret. Conversations during lunches extended increasingly, touching personal topics, forgotten dreams, secret fears. He told her about the pressure of maintaining a business empire, about sleepless nights worried about decisions that affected hundreds of jobs. She shared memories of her deceased husband, but also admitted she had learned to live with loss, that God had given her strength to move forward for Daniel. Their hands accidentally touched when passing plates. Their gazes held a second longer than appropriate. Their smiles acquired a special meaning. Daniel noticed the changes with the particular intuition of children and began to make innocent comments about how nice it would be if Thomas were an official part of their family. One March day, after Daniel left for his afternoon classes, Thomas took Margaret's hand between his and confessed something he had been keeping for weeks. He told her he had fallen in love with her, not just with her kindness, but with every part of her being. Margaret cried while responding that she had also discovered feelings she thought she would never experience again, that her heart had learned to love again thanks to that man who had arrived in their lives as a gift from God. The Children's Championship of the Academy took place on a sunny Saturday in April at the Municipal Stadium in Cambridge. The bleachers were full of families cheering for their children, creating a festive atmosphere with flags, noisemakers, and colorful cheers. Daniel played as starting point guard, wearing his team's blue and white uniform, his eyes shining with intense concentration. Margaret and Thomas sat in the front row, their hands intertwined, no longer caring about appearances. During the last months, their relationship had naturally evolved from employee and boss to something much deeper and more genuine. He had met Margaret's neighbors in Dorchester, sharing simple dinners at her small house. She had learned to move comfortably in the mansion, not as an employee but as a special guest. The house employees had noticed the changes and discreetly commented on the romance blooming before their eyes. Mrs. Patterson said she had never seen the boss so happy, so complete, so authentically human. The game was tied 3-3 when there were 5 minutes left until the end. Daniel had played well all afternoon, running without rest, passing the ball with precision, defending when necessary. The coach shouted instructions from the sideline while the clock advanced inexorably. Then happened the play that would remain engraved in the memory of the 3 forever. The shooting guard stole the ball near center court and passed it to Daniel, who began to run toward the opposite basket with surprising speed for his 12 years. The defenders tried to reach him, but he weaved between them with natural ability, his thin legs moving fast over the green court. Margaret rose from her seat with her hands over her mouth, her heart beating so hard she felt the pulsations in her temples. Thomas shouted cheers with a hoarse voice, his fists clenched with tension. Daniel reached the 3-point line and prepared his right hand. The defender came out to close the angle, and in that eternal second between preparation and execution, the entire stadium seemed to hold its breath. The shot came out perfect, with strength but also with precision, toward the upper right corner where the defender couldn't reach it. The ball hit the net, producing that satisfying sound that basketball players live to hear. The referee whistled, marking the valid basket while the bleachers exploded in celebration. Daniel ran with open arms toward where his loved ones were. He jumped the low fence that separated the court from the bleachers and threw himself directly into Margaret and Thomas's arms. The three hugged in a pile of tears, laughter, and pure joy. Margaret kissed her son's sweaty head while murmuring blessings and words of pride. Thomas surrounded both with his arms, feeling that his heart could explode with happiness. The other spectators applauded the moving scene, some also wiping tears because they recognized genuine love when they saw it. The coach had to shout Daniel's name 3 times for the boy to return to the court and finish the last minutes of the game. After the 4-3 victory, while Daniel celebrated with his teammates, Thomas took Margaret's hands between his. The stadium slowly emptied, families walking toward the parking lot, carrying flags and horns, but they remained sitting in the bleachers enjoying the cool afternoon breeze. He had planned this moment for weeks, rehearsing words in his office, buying a simple but beautiful ring he carried in his pants pocket. His hands trembled slightly when he began to speak, confessing that the last months had been the happiest of his life. He told her that she and Daniel had taught him the true meaning of family, of home, of purpose. He admitted that his enormous mansion had always been just an empty house until they filled it with laughter and love. Margaret listened with tears running freely down her cheeks while the sun began to descend, painting the sky orange and pink. Then Thomas did something he never imagined doing. He knelt in front of her on the metal bleachers, took the ring out of his pocket, and asked if she wanted to marry him. "But first," added Thomas with an emotional voice, "I need permission from someone very important." He got up and walked toward where Daniel was putting his equipment in a new sports bag. The boy saw him approach and smiled with that smile that melted hearts. Thomas knelt again, this time in front of the boy, remaining at his height. He explained that he deeply loved his mother, that he wanted to take care of both of them for the rest of his life, that he wished to be an official part of their family. Then he asked the question that would change everything forever. He asked if Daniel would allow him to marry Margaret. The boy didn't hesitate a second before launching himself to hug the billionaire, whispering against his chest words that made Thomas cry like never before. Daniel told him he was already a dad to him, that he had been since the day they shared the first lunch, that God had sent him to complete their family. 8 months later, in an intimate ceremony in a small chapel decorated with ivy and white roses, Margaret and Thomas married surrounded by Mrs. Patterson, neighbors from Dorchester, and Daniel's teammates. The cold mansion transformed into a warm home where laughter resonated daily, where family lunches were sacred, where love was expressed in concrete actions every day. Margaret finally had peace and security. Daniel had a father who loved him unconditionally, and Thomas discovered that life's true luxury couldn't be bought with money. The plastic container that once crossed through a rusty window now rested stored in a special place, reminding them that the greatest miracles are born from the smallest sacrifices made with infinite love. Before we say goodbye, I want to invite you to become part of this community. Subscribe to the channel and share your own story in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness that changed everything? Have you been the giver or receiver of unexpected generosity? Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. We're building a space where real stories of hope, sacrifice, and transformation are celebrated, and your voice matters here. Don't just watch, join the conversation, share what moved you about this story, and let's remind each other that love in its purest form still changes lives. Hit that subscribe button and let's continue discovering together what truly matters in this world.